Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for December 2020. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator. And in this month's video we're going to be talking all about using the drawing tools in Total Quilter and my decorative quilter. So before we get started looking at lines themselves, I have a few concepts I want to go over with you so that we have a grounding in what lines are really all about. Lines are called vectors and also artwork and lots of other things, curves, and we're going to differentiate those between those kinds of lines based on vectors versus image type objects or image lines. And to show you the difference, I have an owl up here. You can see this owl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to this part of the owl right here. So I'm going to grab my magnifying glass and I'm going to click it and zoom in here. And you can see right away that this part of the owl, this edge here, isn't really a nice clean line. You can see it's got all these little sawtooth zigzags, and if I zoom in even more, you can see a bunch of different things. First of all, you can see that it's not just one solid color, it's a whole series of colors as it fades into the base color, and even in the color itself you can see that there's all these different little colored squares. Each one of these squares is called a pixel, and as we zoom in and out of an image, also known as a bitmap image, these pixels stay the same size. So as we zoom in, they get bigger and they get smaller. So they don't change as we zoom in, but we see them differently, and we can see here that this edge isn't really a very nice edge at all. And so this is how pictures are made up of pixels like this of varying colors. And the reason it's kind of faded like this on the edge, this is called dithering, because when we're zoomed out, and let me double click the magnifying glass to zoom back out, when the eye sees this at a sort of a normal view, you perceive it more as a straight edge rather than a jagged edge. You can still see it's kind of jagged at this magnification. We're at 246%. Now what I'm going to do is bring up this same image, but instead of drawn as pixels like this, it's going to be drawn with vectors. And you can see right away that the color is brighter and it's all one shade. It's not moving its shades around. And I'm going to get my magnifying glass in and I'm going to zoom into that same area of the owl. And you can see when I do that that this edge is still a nice smooth edge. Let me zoom in some more, and I can even keep zooming in. I'm just going to keep zooming into this edge, keep zooming in, and you can see when I'm zoomed in, and you can see I'm actually zoomed in here 182,608%. So I'm zoomed way in. If I keep zooming in, I'm now at 1.8 million%. You can see that this edge is still a nice clean edge. That's because this owl was drawn with vectors. And what's a vector? To show you what a vector is, I'm going to get another new piece of paper here, a new blank design window. And we're going to draw vectors with our drawing tools. So the drawing tools consist of two different icons, and they are right here. There's this one that looks like a pencil, and it's the artwork tool, and it's what we use to actually draw our lines or shapes. And then this icon, which currently isn't lit up right now, is the type of line or shape that we're drawing. All right, so here, if I click the pencil, this icon turns on, and this tells me I'm in line mode, and that's the default. And the way line mode works is this. If I click a point, and I move the cursor anywhere else on my screen and click another point, the computer is going to connect those 2 points together, and that's a line with 2 points, a point on each end of the line. Now a line can have more than one point along it, so if I click again, I'm going to get a third point. If I click one more time, I'm going to get a fourth point, and on. And I can click over here and get another point. And you can see that as I keep doing that, it is going to continue to add points to the line. Now, this is what's known as an open shape right now. If I want to leave it like this, I can right click anywhere off of it and it will say that I'm done with that line. So I'm done inputting that line. So the way you tell it you're done is with a right click. Now this is a shape. It's also a multi-segment line, but it's what's also known as an open shape because it's not closed. It's not fully enclosed. If I want to enclose it, I can select it, and I've got a tool right here called Close Shape. If I click that tool, it automatically draws a line right here to close the shape. Now, why do we work with lines? Well, the main reason is to outline something. So lines are also called outlines or artwork in Floriani. It outlines a space, and we can fill it with stitches. We can fill it with a solid color. We can fill it with fabric. We can fill it with any kind of a stitch type down here with our conversion icons, and we can actually trace around the edge with a stitch as well. So for example, if I want to make this a run stitch going around this shape, I come down here to my run stitch tool and click it, and it makes a run stitch going around that line. All right, if I wanted to make it a steel stitch, which is a fixed width satin, if I click that, I will get a satin stitch going around the line. If I'd rather fill it with a pattern, like let's fill it with a texture pattern, let's use 257. Now I've got that shape filled with that stitching pattern. Okay, so that's how we use shapes. And if it wasn't a closed shape, let me delete this. I'm going to press delete on my keyboard to delete it. And you can see I've still got that artwork there. That's because when we create a line in Floriani Total Quilter or my decorative quilter and we convert it into stitches, it leaves the original artwork behind, which is here. So I'm actually going to press delete again to delete that. And I'm going to redraw my line. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line and I'm just going to leave it like that. And if I select it and then I convert it into a run stitch, it's just going to make that run stitch. Now I can't fill it because there's nothing to fill, but I've got that run stitch there in the shape of that line. Now the reason we use lines to do our fills and conversion into stitches is they're very, very accurate. And that's what's great about using lines versus images. It also means that we can reshape this line if we want to. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to click off it to deselect it. I'm going to actually come over here and select the stitches I just made and delete that. So we're back to a line. And I'm going to come to a tool. Actually, I'm going to select it again to get my tool. To shape this line, we use something called the shape tool. And the shortcut for it is right here. And it's also over here. And if I click the shape tool, now you can see that it looks different. It's outlined in purple, and I can see these two squares at the end. These are called the anchor points. So this is where the line is anchored, here and here. If I hover my mouse over an anchor point, you can see that at some point that little blue dot appears below the cursor. If I move away, the blue dot goes away. If I move back, the blue dot comes. What the blue dot means is that as long as I see that blue dot, I don't have to be right on the point, but if I click, it will select that point. And now if I drag the point, so I'm clicking and dragging, I can move that point around. So I can shorten the line, I can lengthen the line, I can rotate it around, etc. Okay? There's other things I can do with this line. So for example, if you see if I move this shape tool to the center of the line somewhere along its center, you see the cursor changes to a curved line. And what that means is I can now what's called rubber band this. So if I click and drag, I bend the line wherever I click. So I'm bending it around that point and I'm moving it. And you can also see that there's these two things sticking out from it. Let me click it again so you can see them. These are called handles. And what I did by doing that rubber banding was that I changed this line, which was a straight line, into a curved line. So let's talk about the difference. So I'm going to undo that and go back to a straight line. If I come to this point with my shape tool and I right click on it, you can see I have some options, but there's these 4 selections right here in the center. One's called line, one's called cusp, one's called smooth, one's called symmetrical. So each type of point on a line can have one of these 4 properties. It can either be a line point, also known as a straight line point. It can be a cusp point, a smooth point, or a symmetrical point. Now these last 3, these are all curved points. Okay? So if I were to click off of that and reselect my line here and I bend it, okay, you can see that those 2 handles appear again. Now if I right click on this point, you can see that it's been changed to a cusp. And what the cusp is either the end of a line that's curved, or it's the type of point that allows you to change directions. All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, so I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is show you one more thing you can do with this menu right now. And that is if I right click, I can add a point to this line. So if I click add point, it adds a point to this line. Now if I right click on it, you can see that it is a smooth point. All right, now it didn't really change the line because the smooth point was right in line with it. But if I now move this point, okay, you can see that it has some handles on it. And what the smooth curve is a type of curve that moves smoothly in and out of that point. So the curve moves smoothly in and out of it. And these handles adjust a couple of things. First of all, they adjust the angle that this comes in at and the amount of curve. So if I click this one handle and drag it, you can see that it bends it. But you can see the other point is moving along with it. All right, so I can seesaw this back and forth and it bends the angle. Okay, it's bending it. I can move this point horizontally or vertically and it changes the angle that it enters and exits the point. You can see I can pull it way out so it bows, or I can move it way in where it almost looks like a straight point, and you can see how that works. But you can see no matter what I do of moving this point around the circle, the other point moves along with it. So that's the way a smooth point works. Let's change it by right-clicking, and we'll change it to a symmetrical point. Now a symmetrical point works kind of the same way, except whatever I do on one side will be echoed on the other side. It has symmetry, hence the name symmetrical point. If I click and drag this one out, you see it moves both of them out. If I move them both in, you see it moves both of them in. And if I rotate, they both rotate, just like on the other type of point. Okay, so the last type of point is a cusp. So if I right-click here and change this to a cusp, it doesn't look any different right now, but what a cusp does, it allows me to independently control the handle of each side without having any effect on the other side. So if I move this point, you can see it only affects this side of the line and the other side is not moving at all. This allows me to get effects like this, where I can have a sharp change in the angle here, but really no change in the angle here. So if I need to make an abrupt change in direction, then the type of point I want is a cusp. All right, because I can change each side individually. I can even make lines loop like that if I want to. All right, and if I change these points to something else, the effect on the line is going to change. So if I change this back to a smooth point, you can see it changes what that line does. All right, so I can add points, I can right click and I can delete a point, and this allows me to create virtually any kind of shape without too many points. So when you trace something, you're going to click along, adding points along something's path, and the idea is to use as few points as possible so that it's easier to rebend or control that line. So we've looked at this basic kind of way of inputting points, straight line points, and then converting them. But there are other ways to edit and insert points. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to delete this. Again, I'm pressing delete on my keyboard. Now I'm going to go back and get the same type of straight line point. If I click, just simply left click the mouse, I'm going to get a series of straight line points. But if I hold down the control key on the mouse while I click, and it's important to press control first and then click and then let off control. If I click and hold down control, you see that the line starts to bend. All right? I am bending that line because I'm holding down control. If I let off control, which I just did, now when I click, I'm getting straight line points again. So I can combine any combination of control clicks and regular left clicks to get combinations of curved and not curved points. And of course, I can always go back in. Again, I'm going to right click to end what I've just created. I can always go back in with my shape tool. Once I've selected it, my shape tool is active. There's a little shortcut right down here, which I like to use these days. I can move these points around. I can change what they are. I can rotate the handles, etc. And you can see that as I change one point, the points on other side of it get affected as well. So sometimes I need to make multiple adjustments. Now this is a straight line point. You can see there's no handles there. If I right click it and I click smooth, I'm going to get a way to smooth that line out or smooth the transition or do whatever I want with it. All right. So that's basic point editing, doing a line. All right. Now there are other ways to draw other than clicking with a mouse. So once again, I'm going to select my shape. I'm going to delete it. And we select those by, if I select my artwork tool, there's a little drop down here by the line tool. So I'm going to click that so you can see the options. All right. Now this first one here, this is called the pen tool. So I'm going to click it, and you can use this with a mouse, but it's pretty unwieldy to use with a mouse. It's more, it's better to use it with a drawing pad of some kind. And so our add-on Sketch-A-Stitch add-on uses this type of tool, but with a lot of extra functions. So I'm going to click and drag. So I have not let off the mouse. I'm dragging. So you can see it's creating a continuous line, and I can do any kind of a shape I want with it. And when I let off, it's going to add points, as few points as possible, to recreate that line that I drew. So if I don't like this little discontinuity in here, I can go to my shape tool and get rid of those extra points or do whatever I want. But that's how the pen tool works. So for sketching or drawing something freehand, that's the pen tool. So let me reselect this and delete it. And let's look at the next set of tools. So I'm going to click my artwork tool. I'm going to click the drop down, and I'm going to go to this next tool. Now this tool is called the Bezier tool, and it's a different way of inputting straight line points and curved points rather than clicking or control clicking. I'm going to select it. Now why is it called Bezier? That's a weird word. It's because the mathematician who invented this system of points and coordinates and mathematics to tell it how to bend these lines, his name was Bezier, so it's named after him. It's his system. So the way the Bezier tool works, and I will admit this takes a lot of getting used to, and I never use it. I've just never really gotten used to drawing with it. But you can if you want. You click it just like the straight line tool, and click it to get straight line points. If I want to input a curved point, I click and drag, and that curves the line. You can see I'm curving it. So I'm going to click and drag till I get the curve I want and then let off. And I'm going to do the same thing with the next one and drag. And it's a little hard to control this. But you'll see when I get to the next example how this can sort of work, all right? So the easy way to make this work. But that's the idea, is it's a shortcut way of inputting straight line and curved line points. And people who draw like this for a living tend to use the Bezier tool because it's much, much faster once you get used to using it. Okay, so I'm going to select that line and I'm going to delete it. And let's look at a couple of the other tools here. So I'm going to click my artwork tool again, click my down arrow, and this here is called the arc tool. And I'm going to skip that. We're going to come back to it because I want to go to the curve tool. Now, what is the curve line tool? Well, it's just like the straight line tool, except it's opposite. So if I click and click, so I'm just left clicking, you see every click I do makes a curved point. If I want to make a straight line point, I hold down Control, and now I get straight line points. If I let off Control, I start to get curves again. So no matter where I click, I'm going to get a curve. So it's just like the opposite of the line tool. So if you're doing a lot of curves, this saves you from having to hold down Control all the time, and you only need to hold it down when occasionally you need a straight line point. So that's the curve tool. Let me select this again, and I'm going to show you a tool that's kind of unique to Total Quilter, and that is the arc tool, and that is this one. So the way the arc tool works is if I click a point, and then I click a point that's somewhere, you know, say up, for example. It doesn't have to be, but let's use up. And then I click down again, or somewhere off this line. It's going to create an arc that smoothly goes between these 3 points. All right? And if I click over here again, it's going to create another intermediate point. And if I click down here, it's going to create that arc between here and here. So once again, if I click here and I click here, it's going to create an arc that goes between those 2 points. So I can do this kind of a scalloped effect. Every third point that I click is going to arc between the previous 2 points. All right. So let me right click to end that one, and I'll show you one more time. So if I click a point and I click a point and I click a point, it's going to get an arc between there. If I want to make another kind of a scallop that goes between here and here, I click up here and I click down here and I get that scallop. So I click up here, click down here, I get that scallop. Okay, if you had a grid up here, you could make these points perfect and you could get a perfect scallop. So those are all your basic drawing tools, and you saw how to edit points by going into shape mode. So that is this icon right here, or this icon over here, shape mode, and click it, and you can see that now I'm in shape mode and I can click and drag these points along and change their curve style, etc. So now that you understand the basic drawing tools, let's see a practical application and what we might do with them. So one of the most common things we do with the drawing tools is we trace a design. So let me go back to our owl here, and let's just trace part of this design so you can see how it works. All right, so we're going to trace along here this line, and we're going to, let's start down here. We'll come up here, we'll do a sharp point, and then we will come around here and do another sharp point. So that will give us a good indication of what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here to my drawing tool, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go into line mode. All right, and I'm going to start right in this corner here with a straight line point. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace along this. In fact, let me zoom in to just this part so you can see a little bit better of what I'm doing. All right, so let me, we'll just forget we put that point in. We'll just try again. Okay, so we're going to put in a point right here, and then this is kind of a curve here. All right, so what I'm going to do is hold down Control and click, and you can see first it just put in a straight line because it didn't know how to curve it till it sees the third point. So if I come up here to the end and I click it, again, I'm going to hold down Control. You can see how it curved that line to match. All right. Now, I've got a cusp here, and I want to put in a cusp, right? But I can't just put in a cusp directly. I have to come back and either later change it to a cusp, or I can do a trick. And here's the trick. Okay. I can come just a little bit further down the line here with a straight line point, and that automatically tells it to change direction because now it's a straight line. Now what I'm going to do is go back to holding down Control and draw curved lines all along the rest of this. Okay, and you can see I'm not being very accurate here, but you can see how it's bending that line as I continue to add points. Okay, so let's come all the way up to this point here, and we'll not tell it to do the cusp trick. We'll come back later and we'll change it to a cusp. So I'm going to click down here, and you can see what happens. See, it made that kind of a rounded curve there. We're going to ignore that for now. We're just going to come down here, and then I'm going to right click to end it. Right now I'm going to select it again, and we're going to fix this point here. So I'm going to go into shape mode. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to tell it to turn that into a cusp. I'm going to reselect it. Let me zoom in so you can see what we're up to here. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go into shape mode. I'm going to click this point, and I'm going to change it into a cusp. I already did that, so it's already a cusp. I'm going to click it once again to see the handles, and if I bend this handle towards where I want the line to go, you can see I straighten it out. I'm going to do the same thing with this side. You can see I straighten it out, and you can see how that point's not really in the right place, so I'm just going to move it, and this point's not really in the right place either, so I'll just move it over a little bit, and now I have a better line. And I can keep doing this over here, but this is zoomed in 4,000%. So you can adjust these, all right? But if you wanted to fill this shape, whether this point was here or here, this is way, way smaller than a stitch. So this little bit of inconsistency in the curve here, no one is ever going to notice that when it's at regular size and it's turned into stitches. So that is a practical application of what we do with lines and how we trace something with them. So I promised you before a practical application of showing you how to use the Bezier tool to do this tracing. So to do that, I'm going to double click my magnifying glass to zoom back out. I will zoom back into the part that we are working on here, and I'm going to delete the line that we've already created there. So I did my selection, press delete on my keyboard. I'm going to go back to my drawing tools. This time I'm going to select the Bezier tool, which is here. All right, and let's just draw the top of this line. So the way the Bezier tool works is you click to get a straight line point, and you click and drag to get a curve point. So the dragging part is the confusing part because it's not real intuitive how it's going to make that line go. But here's the secret. If I click a regular point, so right here, and then I click and drag along the curve where I want it to go, okay? If I just keep clicking and kind of dragging along that line, okay, you can see that as I do that. Now when I change directions, I have to, drag along a new direction. So if I just do that and just drag along a new direction, so I'm kind of tracing the edge of that line with my cursor. And as long as I don't get too far off the beaten path, I'm going to create a line. Now you can see it's kind of messed up a little bit here. Again, that's because I'm not real used to this tool, but you can kind of get an idea of the secret of how that works. So if I keep clicking and dragging along that line, and I really go along the line. So I want that handle to stay on the edge of the line there. You can see that I get it to look pretty good. If I just click here without dragging and right click, I've ended that, and you can see this line. All right, so that is how to use Bezier tool to draw. And there's much more to the subject of lines and shapes and vectors and curves, and we'll get to that in a future lesson. So that wraps up our lesson for December 2020. I want to invite you to come back next month and next year for another edition of Total Quilter Monthly, and I hope you have a happy holiday and a happy new year.